Hey scoundrels, we've got this little diddly-do. I don't know if you can see it, because the camera's far away. But this is the Ned Rig, and we're going to talk about it today. So, like I said in the intro, we're talking about the Ned Rig today. We'll go a little bit through the history. We'll go through what equipment I think is best to use for it, based on the things that I've been reading. And at this point, I fished it a little bit. I had recorded this previously, and somehow that video mysteriously disappeared.
You know, for someone who doesn't care, you're awfully harping this point.
I don't know how to humble nag. But, so at the point of recording this, I've fished this a little bit already and had some success, and I can modify some of the things that I had originally said. And, we'll talk about how to fish it. So yeah, the Ned Rig, from what I understand, originally coined the Midwest Wig. Words, the Midwest Rig. There we go. And it wasn't real popular. I think it was called the Midwest Rig because people used it mostly in the Midwest. And this gentleman by the name of Ned Rig came along and he found it and put a real spotlight on it. This was around 2006, I think. And he, from things that I've read, articles on his or snippets from articles, whichever, he's actually taken this to be his go-to way to catch fish. It is definitely a numbers game. You're not necessarily going to catch a ton of big fish on it, but you are going to catch, or you can catch a ton of fish. I don't know why I'm playing with that, because I have to fiddle with things. So, in the last few years, this rig setup, this lure type, has really taken off. Z-Man has partnered with Ned Rig to develop a better jig for it and the right baits for it, and they helped push it more into the spotlight. And here we are today, and almost everybody knows what the Ned Rig is. Like, honestly, I don't feel like I'm adding anything. I'm doing this a lot more for me, and, you know, hopefully to present the information in a way that'll help you guys out a lot more. Touching on things that people kind of overlook a lot of times. So that's a rough basic history of the Ned Rig. Now, what is the Ned Rig? Well, generally you have a jig head, often very lightweight. We'll get some close-ups of these, maybe. Generally pretty lightweight, and it's more of a finesse style hook, so it's going to be a lot lighter weight. And then you've got a shorter kind of worm. The Z-Mans are a real popular one because they are a lot more buoyant despite their high salt content, or something with the way they do their plastic. Brain fart, loading content. But you generally have a worm or a stick or some other kind of bait thing on your hook that's generally around 3 inches up to 4 sometimes. You can put larger stuff on here, but essentially you just take your hook, there's a thing down here, and you just rig it up like a normal jig head, and then you tie it onto your rod. Well, you normally have your jig tied on first. Speaking of which, I don't have my equipment over here. Time out. Time in. So, that's your business end of things, essentially. I do have my medium rig, my medium combo rig set up for doing a Ned Rig. I've got quite a bit lighter jig head on there. than the other one I was just showing. But you're going to want to use something generally medium to light as far as your rod power goes, and preferably something in a moderate action, just because, like I said, you're using a finesse style hook, so it's a lighter wire. It penetrates a lot easier, so you don't need as much force. Additionally, it's a lot easier to straighten it out. Or I actually had one, I don't know if it was a fluke or what, but I had an extra wide gap offset Ned Rig hook from flat somebody, I don't know. That part's not necessarily important, but I broke off at one of the at the first 90-degree bend for the offset. So this is mine. Mine's a fast action. It's been doing okay, but I was using a little bit heavier hooks on it, so that might be part of the reason why I was doing okay with it. And they're a little bit heavier than that one. I was using 1/8 ounce jig heads. This is my light one. It's moderate action. It's all the things that I suggest you should use. And for those reasons, also you're generally using a little bit lighter line. You can use a little bit heavier, maybe. Nothing like, not like a 15 or a 20 pound, but like a 10 pound test maybe. And yeah, let's go ahead. So you're matching your line up to your rod, and you're matching it up to your lure. A lot of times with a lighter lure, you want a lighter line so you can cast a little bit further. But with this one, going back to the guy who made it popular, he preferred to use a 10 pound mono because it was just that little added buoyancy to keep the lure floating in the strike zone a little bit longer, or to give it more time to fall down to the bottom. Because the Ned Rig is an extremely finesse style fishing technique. Let's see here, what else? Let's keep on the line a little bit here. Now, mine, I generally use a braid main line and use some kind of leader, either mono or fluoro. You can use either one depending on how you want to fish this. But for sake of generality, you're going to be more focused on using a mono line because, again, this is super finesse and you want it to float down to the bottom a lot slower, and the mono helps with that because it's more buoyant than fluoro. Fluoro sinks, mono floats. Easy enough. Again, you're generally using lighter line, anywhere from 6 to 10 pounds, depending on your jig head size, what you're fishing around. Not recommended to fish around cover a whole lot. You can, it's just you're gonna lose a lot of hooks that way. Trust me, I know. But you're generally gonna be along the shoreline, along the bank, or a drop off, maybe a little bit by grass where it's generally pretty open, so you don't need to worry about cranking through some heavy material to bring the fish back to you, or in the event you get snagged, being able to keep your hooks. Oh, and then the reel. So most people are using a spinning combo for this anyways, and my experience leads me to believe that that's because spinning combos generally work a lot better with lighter lines, just because of the way the reel is set up, because of the way it feeds the line out, releases line. I'm not sure what the correct term is there, but you're using a spinning combo. You're not going to get a whole lot of speed, but I don't think speed is necessarily something that you want for this technique. Generally, on my light line or my light setup, I have my Fluger reel. I switched it because I was using lighter stuff with my ultralight. So I just switched the reels because I needed a little bit more speed for what I was throwing with this at the time. And stuff. But my fluger is somewhere in the 5.2 to 1 gear ratio, I believe. And most of my other ones are like a 6 to 6.2, which is just about the fastest you can get on a spinning combo. You can use either, I just think, because of the way you're presenting this to the fish and the way this technique is designed to work. A little bit slower is retrieve speed is a little bit better. You can fish a little bit faster one, a little bit slower. Just take some concentration. I'll talk about that here a little bit more in a sec, because I think that's really about it for how that fishes. So, different techniques you can use. The easiest one is just a straight swim back. In my video to go along with this, the fishing side of this, I do catch a fish that way and almost catch another one. He did follow it, just didn't commit to biting on it. But it's just, as it says, you're just reeling it in and letting it glide through the water towards you. The more common technique, or generally the more recommended way, is the yo-yo. I'm going to keep a hold of this. Where you've got your rod tip pretty much facing straight out from you, perpendicular, big words. And then you're letting the lure fall. Let me back up a minute. Generally with this, you're going to throw it out there, put a little bit of extra line out because you want it to fall on slack line, so that way it falls straight down instead of acting like a pendulum. So you're out there, you're letting it sink down to the bottom, got your rod tip out, close your bell, pick up the slack a little bit, and then you're going to lift your rod tip up, let it fall again, leave the slack there again so that way it can fall straight down instead of doing that pendulum action and swinging. And then you just keep repeating that as you bring in. Key thing to this technique is patience, and that's something that I think I'm going to address one of these days in a separate video. Another technique, this is what I was using also to catch some fish, is the drag technique. Again, got your rod parallel, all the previous steps apply, and you just drag it back, bring it forward. Now what I was doing to help myself be more patient with this is I drag it back, bring it forward, and then reel. And then drag it back, come back forward, and then reel. So that way I was constantly doing something and it kept my brain distracted a little bit, but it was allowing that bait to sit there for 2, 3, 4 seconds like you're supposed to. However far back you drag it and come back forward is going to give you a little bit more time. But you're essentially just, either dragging it straight through the sand or dirt or whatever, or maybe it's bouncing a little bit. Whatever it's doing down there on the bottom based on structure and stuff. The fish will see it moving and then see it stop. Kind of like a wounded or bait fish or some other kind of creature. Who knows? What else can you do? You can twitch your, sorry, I got a lipless crank on there. But you can twitch your rod a little bit as it's falling, helps it add a little bit of action to it. You can also twitch it as you're bringing it back, or just twitch it a little bit and spot, pick up the slack, twitch it a little bit and spot, pick up the slack. Because that twitching's still going to bring it back. It's just going to be a very, very slow process. Say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. And then bouncing it, where you just kind of, not necessarily twitching your rod tip, but just slight lifts, kind of similar to how you might do with a Texas rig. And there's probably 100 other different things you could do. Obviously, you can combine some of these techniques. Try some other things, like the drag thing is something that's pretty common with a lipless crankbait. You have to play around a little bit because sometimes the fish wants something a little bit specific. I do want to rewind this back a little bit and talk about why this technique is so successful, or why my personal opinion on why this technique seems to be so successful, and that's due to the fact that this bait, this lure, based on the variations on the lures now, but also it's such a small profile that it can mimic just about anything. It can look like a small crawdad, it can look like a small bait fish, a worm, a lizard, like some kind of creature, who knows. Just kind of depends on whatever's in your water. It can look like a number of things. Like I said, there is, I think I have it up here. There's all kinds of different stuff that you can use. I've got these tight lines UV things. I'm actually gonna get some bigger ones of these, but it's, you know, your 3.5 inch stick, and it's got little arms, like a wacky waving inflatable. I don't ever remember the entire thing.
Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube, man.
Someone might have to find that and put it in there for me, please. I got a couple different colors of that. I got these missile baits. They look like a little crawdad, and they're very buoyant. They float pretty well. We started off with the Z-Man. What else do we got here? A lot of these are pretty much the same, they're just a little bit different style. Guggen Squad put rattle in there so it makes a little bit of extra noise. Got this Deadly Dudley Jr. So it just looks like a little fish. It's in that same size range. So, you know, it could look like a little fish hopping along the bottom. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of companies getting into this game. They're making all kinds of different stuff. You just have to figure out what works for you and make the best of it. So, yeah, speaking of that, if you've gotten this far, tell me what kind of success you've had with the Ned Rig, what your go-to bait is. You know, I'm looking for suggestions. I'm really digging these Z-Man things in some ways. That's another topic. And the rattle and net, those have been the two biggest success, or the most successful lures for me. But yeah, let me know what you're using and what kind of success you have. Like, subscribe, do all those good things, and until next time, follow your weird.